What is up, everyone? Welcome back to your favorite class of the day. That would be ELA 1 with Mr. Williamson. I would be lying if I told you that I was having a good day or was in a good mood because I am not, in all frank honest. So I'm going to try to push through this and get it done, but I want to be honest about where I'm at currently. So that got me thinking. I'm not necessarily doing great right now, but I also want to check on you guys. These are weird times, and the holidays are approaching, but there's a lot of things going on in the world. So I wanted to just ask you really quick, how are you doing? The quote of the day, it's good to have friends that will check up on you. So let me check up on you. If you want to share something good that's going on, I would love to read it. If you have something that you're struggling with and you would like to share it, please do. I'll read that as well. If you don't feel like sharing anything with me, you don't have to put anything, okay? But how you doing? Okay, so let's go into the daily objective, then we'll hop right to it and get moving together. Thank you guys for being with me and sharing with me. Our daily objective, I can describe Curly, who is a character, and the possible motivations for his actions. Curly is he's an explosive character, so you're going to be able to describe Curly and the possible motivations for his actions. So why is he doing the things that he's doing? Important character as we move forward in the novel. So before we get started, we have 3 new active vocab words for you. We've gone over quite a few vocab words, but haven't really quizzed you over them. So I'll do some warm-ups to help you guys review them. And then before you guys have any kind of quiz over them. But that will be coming up, so make sure you focus in here. So the first word is pugnacious. Pugnacious means eager to argue and fight. A way that pugnacious might be used in a sentence. The pugnacious bully continued screaming insults at his victims. Remember, if someone is pugnacious, they're eager to argue and fight, an important term as we go forward. So now what I want you to do, use the word pugnacious in a sentence of your own. Our second word is derogatory. Derogatory means expressing a critical and or disrespectful attitude. So if you're being critical or disrespectful, you are being derogatory. So the way that this could be used in a sentence, the derogatory remark about female math students made everyone in the room uncomfortable. So now what I want you to do is go ahead and use the word derogatory in a sentence of your own. Our final word is ominous, something we have done in the past, but we're going to review it. So ominous means giving the sense that something bad or unpleasant is about to happen. So a way that this could be used in a sentence, the sky turned an ominous shade of navy blue, foreshadowing a storm in the coming hours. So now what I want you to do is go ahead and use the word ominous in a sentence of your own. Okay, everyone, so now we're going to be starting on page 24. So what I need you to do is to get your Lord of Mice and Men novel out and open to page 24. If you have not done that, go ahead and pause and do that now. I am going to be asking you to go back in the book and pull out some quotes, so you're going to need to have that book open. Not only that, but when you read with me, you become a better reader. So our focus for these pages, 2 things. Curly is going to be a new character that we meet. I want you to focus, what does he look like? What does he say? And kind of what are his actions? And then lastly, why is Curly so pugnacious? That word we just reviewed. Okay, so if you are in your book, we're going to start about 5 lines down on page 24 at say, what the hell you doing listening? So this was right after the scene where George and Lenny had met the boss for the first time, and they had kind of gone over their plan and about how they needed to lay low so that they could keep their jobs and so on and so forth. And right in this moment, George realizes that Candy, the Swamper, that's his name, Candy, is listening from outside the door and kind of was hearing what they were talking about, which was a private conversation. So we start there. Say, what the hell you doing listening? The old man came slowly into the room. He had his broom in his hand, and at his heels there walked a drag-footed sheepdog, gray of muzzle with pale, blind old eyes. The dog struggled lamely to the side of the room and lay down, grunting softly to himself and licking his grizzled, moth-eaten coat. The Swamper watched him until he was settled. I wasn't listening. I was just standing in the shade a minute scratching my dog. I just now finished swamping out the wash house. You was poking your big ears into our business, George said. I don't like nobody to get nosy. The old man looked uneasily at George, from George to Lenny, and then back. I just come there, he said. I didn't hear nothing you guys was saying. I ain't interested in nothing you was saying. A guy on a ranch don't never listen, nor he don't ask no questions. Damn right he don't, said George, slightly mollified. Not if he wants to stay, working long. Rut, he was assured by the swamper's defense. Come on in and sit down a minute, he said. That's a hell of an old dog. Yeah, I never. I had him ever since he was a pup. God, he was a good sheepdog when he was younger. He stood his broom against the wall and he rubbed his white bristled cheek with his knuckles. How'd you like the boss? He asked. Pretty good. Seems all right. He's a nice fella, the swamper agreed. You gotta take him right. At that moment, a young man came into the bunkhouse. A thin young man with a brown face, pay attention to this, with brown eyes and a head of tightly curled hair. He wore a work glove on his left hand, and like the boss, he wore high-heeled boots. See my old man? He asked. The swamper said, he was just here a minute ago, Curly. Went over to the cookhouse, I think. I'll try to catch him, said Curly. His eyes passed over the new men, and he stopped. He glanced coldly at George and then at Lenny. His arms gradually bent at the elbow, and his hands closed into fists. He stiffened and went into a slight crouch. His glance was at once calculating and pugnacious. Lenny squirmed under the look and shifted his feet nervously. Curly stepped gingerly close to him. You the new guys the old man was waiting for? We just come in, said George. Let the big guy talk. There's some typos in this, sorry. Lenny twisted with embarrassment. George said, Suppose you don't want to talk. Curly lashed his body around. By Christ! He's got to talk when he's spoke to. What the hell are you getting into it for? We travel together, said George. Oh, so it's that way. George was tense and motionless. Yeah, it's that way. Lenny was looking helplessly to George for instruction. Okay, so we're going to look at that line here that Curly just said. So we meet this character. He's short. He's got curly hair. Anyway, we're going to get into his description a little more, but consider what he just said. So George said that him and Lenny travel together, and he said this line. I'll try to say it how he probably said it. Oh, so it's that way. George was tense and motionless. Yeah, it's that way. So, question one. It's okay if you don't get this right. What does Curly mean by this phrase, oh, so it's that way? Why do you think he says it? Try to think of more than one possible reason. Go ahead and answer that in at least 2 sentences now. Okay, so if you weren't quite sure, so Curly is suggesting that George and Lenny might be romantic partners. He might say this definitely in an attempt to get a rise out of George, kind of make him upset. Curly intends this line to be homophobic, put down, illuminating perhaps maybe that he's insecure given his physical stature, because he's short, and his own rocky marriage. So he kind of says, oh, so it's that way, implying like, oh, you and him travel together. Maybe you do more than that together. He does this to try to make George mad. So question 1B coming to you. Why might making this comment be pugnacious? So I just kind of explained it, but in your own words, explain to me, how is this comment he made pugnacious? Go ahead and do that in 1 sentence now. So likely in the male-dominated ranch culture of the 1930s, such a comment would have been fighting words, as they said in them, adding to Curly's pugnacious characterization. So he says this intentionally to try to get George and Lenny mad. These are the type of phrases that you would say to someone in the 1930s to try to start a fight. Okay, so we continue, if you're in your book, about 5 lines up from the bottom of page 25 at Lenny was looking helplessly. Lenny was looking helplessly to George for instruction. And you won't let the big guy talk, is that it? He can talk if he wants to tell you anything. He nodded slightly to Lenny. We just come in, said Lenny softly. Curly stared levelly at him. Well, next time you answer when you're spoke to. He turned towards the door and walked out. His elbows were bent out a little. George watched him out, and then he turned back to the swamper. Say, what the hell's he got on his shoulder? Lenny didn't do nothing to him. The old man looked cautiously at the door to make sure no one was listening. That's the boss's son, he said quietly. Curly's pretty handy. He done quite a bit in the ring. He's a lightweight, and he's handy. Well, let him be handy, said George. He don't have to take after Lenny. Lenny didn't do nothing to him. What's he got against Lenny? The swamper considered. This is important, pay attention. Well, tell you what, Curly's like a lot of little guys. He hates big guys. He's all the time picking scraps with big guys. Kind of like he's mad at him because he ain't a big guy. You seen little guys like that, ain't you? Always scrappy. Sure, said George. I seen plenty tough little guys, but this Curly better not make no mistakes about Lenny. Lenny ain't handy, but this Curly punk is going to get hurt if he messes around with Lenny. Well, Curly's pretty handy, the swamper said skeptically. Never did seem right to me. Suppose Curly jumps a big guy and licks him. Everybody says what a game guy Curly is. And suppose he does the same thing and gets licked, as in punched. Then everybody says everyone says the big guy ought to pick somebody his own size, and maybe the gang up on the big guy. Never did seem right to me. Seems like Curly ain't give nobody a chance. Okay, so we have this concept that we're about to read about, and I'll read it for you. Something to examine that applies to Curly. This is called the Napoleon complex. So context. The Napoleon complex is named after Napoleon Bonaparte, a French military leader during the French Revolution. So he was like a French general. Although he experienced many successes on the battlefield, he was not tall or physically impressive, which surprised many people when meeting him for the first time. People don't know exactly how tall he was, but he was probably like 5'1", 5'2" is what they say. So he was very small. Okay, so the Napoleon complex refers to a specific mindset in which men of small stature, so short men, try to compensate for their size by being especially hostile, power-hungry, and aggressive in their relationships. A man with such a complex would be expected to pick out the biggest or toughest male around to prove his strength against them. Note that this complex is not a real medical condition, but rather a phrase people use to explain a certain type of aggressive male behavior. So just to reiterate, it's when like a small man will do whatever he can, including fighting bigger people, being really aggressive to prove that they are tough. It's called the Napoleon complex. So I'm going to show you about like 20 seconds of this clip just so you guys can maybe see it in a more modern context. But yes, watch this with me. Okay, so now returning back to our question, coming for you. What I want you to do now, on page 26, there's multiple pieces of evidence that you could use. So what I want you to do is locate a piece of evidence on page 26, which shows that Curly might suffer from a Napoleon complex. I want you to just write that quote down. Okay, so a couple, my two favorites, you might have picked these out. So from page 26, Curly's like a lot of little guys. He hates big guys. So that is similar to a Napoleon complex. Also, he's all the time picking scraps with big guys, kind of like he's mad at him because he ain't a big guy. So in those statements, we see Candy, the swamper, explaining that Curly is normally very aggressive, almost like he's jealous because he's so small. Okay, everyone, listen up and listen closely because I need to explain this and you need to know how to do it if you don't already. So the next slide you go is going to be this box with some instructions on it, okay? You're going to need to fill in this box. How? You click this button, go down here, the capital T, lowercase t, click it. It'll create a text box. So then all you have to do is position the text box correctly over the letters or over the correct box. So then you can literally type into the box. When you're done with that one, all you got to do is click this button twice. It'll make a new box. Then you move it to there. and you adjust it, and then you can type into here. You do that for each of the 4 boxes. So what you're doing is you're trying to find a quote for each of the 4 boxes about Curly, one that shows his speech, one that shows what his actions are like, one that shows what he looks like, one that shows his effects on others from pages 24 to 26. Don't tell me you don't know how to do it. You can do it. I'm going to look at this heavily when I go to grade your assignment.